"Get out of here, Dad. We don't want you in this house anymore." Those were the exact words my own daughter said to me while I packed my few belongings into 2 worn-out suitcases. What she didn't know was that I had prepared the biggest surprise of her life. My name is Robert Thompson. I'm 74 years old, and for 50 years I worked as a trusted employee at a construction company here in Chicago, Illinois. Before I continue with this story, I want to ask you something special. If this story is touching your heart, if you know someone who has been through something similar, or if you simply feel these life experiences are worth sharing, you would make me very happy if you left your like and subscribe to the channel. It's not just a button, it's your way of telling me that these stories matter, that older people also have a voice. And please, share with me in the comments from what city in America or around the world you're listening to me. It excites me to know that these words reach hearts in so many different places. My story begins 3 years ago, when I decided it was time to stop working. I had dedicated my entire life to building houses, buildings, projects that today still stand in different neighborhoods of Chicago. My hands knew every type of cement, every tool, every trick of the trade. But at 71, my body no longer responded like before. My knees hurt every morning, my back protested with every movement, and doctors had recommended I rest. I had a modest but comfortable house in Lincoln Park, a property I had bought with the sweat of decades of honest work. 3 bedrooms, a small garden where I grew tomatoes and peppers, and a workshop in the backyard where I repaired things for the neighborhood. It was my refuge, my home, the place where I had raised my daughter Sarah after her mother left us when she was just 8 years old. Sarah, my only daughter, was 42 years old then. She worked as a secretary at a government office and had been in a relationship for 2 years with a man named Michael, a 35-year-old guy who pretended to be an entrepreneur, but actually sold insurance door to door. From the first day I met him, something inside me warned that this man was not good for my daughter. He had that fake salesman smile, that way of talking that promises everything but commits to nothing. Have you ever met someone like that? People who from the first encounter make you feel distrustful, but who manage to charm those you love. Michael was exactly that. With Sarah, he acted like the perfect boyfriend. He brought her cheap flowers every Friday, took her to dinner at fast food restaurants, and promised her a future full of luxuries he clearly couldn't afford. When I announced my retirement, Sarah immediately suggested that Michael move into the house. "I need you to understand something. My daughter had lived with me her entire adult life. She had never paid rent, never covered electricity, water, gas, or maintenance expenses. I had always taken care of everything because I considered that to be my responsibility as a father. But now, with my reduced pension and limited savings, the financial situation had become tighter. At first, when Michael started staying over on weekends, I tried to be kind. I shared meals, asked about his work, even lent him tools when he said he needed to fix something on Sarah's car. But soon I began to notice troubling changes in the dynamics of my own home. Michael had started behaving as if he owned the place. He changed TV channels without asking, rearranged the living room furniture to his liking, and most seriously, he had started convincing Sarah that I was a hindrance to their couple's plans. I heard him one night, when they thought I was already asleep, telling her they could never have a normal life while I continued living there. "Come on, Sarah. We're adults now. Your dad already lived his life. Now it's our turn." Those were his exact words. And the most painful thing was hearing my daughter's response. "You're right, Michael. My dad is getting very old. Maybe it's time to find him a more appropriate place for his age." Can you imagine what it feels like to hear your own daughter, the little girl you raised with so much love, referring to you as if you were an old piece of furniture that needs to be discarded? That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake until dawn, remembering all the times Sarah had come crying into my arms when she was little, all the sacrifices I had made to give her the best life possible, all the nights I stayed up taking care of her when she was sick. The situation quickly got worse. Michael was practically living in the house from Monday to Sunday, but never contributed a dollar to expenses. On the contrary, he consumed food, used hot water without limit, left the air conditioning on all night, and every month the bills came higher. When I made any comment about household economics, Sarah immediately came to her boyfriend's defense. "Dad, Michael is going through a rough patch. His sales have been down, but it's going to get better. In the meantime, we can support him a little bit, right? After all, the house is big, and it doesn't cost us anything for him to stay. But it did cost us. It cost me peace of mind. It cost me comfort in my own home. It cost me financially. And above all, it cost me my relationship with my daughter." Arguments became more frequent. Michael had managed to convince Sarah that I was the problem with all their conflicts. According to him, my presence prevented them from having intimacy, from planning their future, from feeling like a real couple. And Sarah, blinded by what she believed was love, began treating me with a coldness I had never experienced. One day I came back from the grocery store and found that they had moved all my things from the workshop to the smallest room in the house. My tools, my workbench, my personal projects, everything was piled up in that tiny space. When I asked what had happened, Michael responded with a cynical smile. "Mr. Thompson, Sarah and I needed that space for our things. You understand, right? Young people need more space." That was the first time I really lost my patience. I told him very clearly that this was my house, that I had worked 50 years to pay for it, and that he had no right to move my belongings. But Sarah immediately took his side. "Dad, don't be selfish. It's just a room. You don't work anymore? You don't need so much space for your things. Selfish? Was I the selfish one for wanting to keep my place in my own house?" That night, while reorganizing my tools in that tiny room, I made a very important decision. I began documenting everything that was happening. Every conversation, every abuse, every disrespect. I had a feeling I was going to need that evidence later. The following months were the most difficult of my life. Michael had managed to completely isolate me within my own house. He had convinced Sarah to change family routines, to cancel Sunday gatherings with my brothers, even not to invite me to dinner when he was present. I had become a ghost in my own home. But Michael made a very big mistake. He underestimated the wisdom that comes with 74 years of life. While he thought he had me defeated, I was preparing something that would change his life forever. You see, during my 50 years of work in construction, I had not only learned to build buildings, I had also learned to be very observant, very meticulous, and above all, very patient. During this terrible time, I began doing something Michael never imagined: investigating his true past. Using my old computer, and with the help of a neighbor who knew how to use the internet, I began searching for information about Michael Davis. What I discovered left me frozen, but at the same time gave me the perfect tools for my plan. Michael wasn't just a frustrated insurance salesman. He had a criminal record for scamming elderly people, had been married 3 times, and had abandoned his previous wives in very difficult financial situations. But most seriously, he had an active restraining order from his ex-wife for domestic violence. My daughter was living with a dangerous man, and I had to protect her, even if she didn't want to be protected. The situation reached its limit one March afternoon. I had returned from a doctor's appointment and found Michael going through my personal documents in my bedroom. When I asked him what he was doing, he responded with an aggressiveness that confirmed all my suspicions. "Mr. Thompson, Sarah and I have been talking. You can't live here anymore. It's time for you to find another place." That afternoon, when Sarah returned from work, we had the most painful conversation of our lives. Michael had prepared everything perfectly. He had told my daughter that I had been aggressive with him, that I had threatened to kick him out of the house, that my presence was affecting her mental health, and Sarah, completely manipulated, made the decision that would mark our lives forever. "Dad, we think it's better if you look for another place to live. Michael and I need our space. We're not children anymore. We have the right to start our own family. You already lived your life? Now let us live ours." When I heard those words come out of my own daughter's mouth, I felt as if they had stabbed a dagger into my heart. "You already lived your life?" Were those the words my daughter was saying to me after having dedicated my entire existence to her? I reminded her of all the sacrifices I had made for her, the extra jobs to pay for her school, the sleepless nights when she was sick, the times I went without dinner so she wouldn't lack anything. But Michael had done his job perfectly. Sarah was no longer the little girl I had raised. The next day they gave me the ultimatum. I had 1 week to find another place to live. 1 week to dismantle the life I had built in 74 years. Sarah had prepared some brochures for nursing homes and retirement facilities, places where I could live appropriately for my age. Places where I would be with people my generation, where I wouldn't bother young couples who had the right to their privacy. That week was the most humiliating of my life. While I packed my belongings, Michael walked around the house as if he already owned it. He had started bringing his things, had hung his pictures on the walls, had even put his plants in my garden. And Sarah acted as if everything was completely normal, as if kicking your father out of his own house was the most natural thing in the world. On the day of my departure, while loading my suitcases into the taxi that would take me to a furnished room I had rented in the South Side, Sarah hugged me with tears in her eyes. "It's for the best, Dad. You're going to be more comfortable with people your age, and we'll be able to start our life together without worries. We'll see each other on Sundays. I promise we'll visit you often." But the Sunday visits never came. The first 2 Sundays I waited for her call, but my phone remained silent. When I called, Sarah always had an excuse. They were busy with house repairs, Michael had work commitments. She felt a little sick. Slowly I realized I had lost not only my house but also my daughter. During the first months in that small, humid room, I fell into a deep depression. I woke up without energy, ate without appetite, and spent afternoons sitting in a chair watching life pass by the window. Many nights I wondered if it was worth continuing to live. I had lost everything: my home, my family, my purpose. But something inside me, that force that had kept my hands working for 50 years, told me this story couldn't end like this. That's when I remembered something very important. During my decades working in construction, I had learned that the strongest foundations are the ones you can't see. And I had foundations that Michael never imagined existed. You see, during all those years of honest work, I had not only built buildings, I had also built relationships, contacts, very valuable friendships. One of my best friends was attorney James Mitchell, a family law specialist I had met when we built his office 15 years earlier. James had always told me that if I ever needed legal help, I shouldn't hesitate to look for him. I decided it was time to collect on that old debt of gratitude. When I told him about my situation, James got furious. "Robert, what they've done to you is total abuse. That house is yours. You have all the legal rights to recover it. But more importantly, I need to investigate this Michael. His behavior sounds very familiar to me, and not in a good way. He proposed a plan that would change everything. A complete investigation of Michael and a lawsuit to recover my property. The investigation revealed things I hadn't imagined in my worst nightmares. Michael Davis didn't just have a criminal record. He was involved in a network of scammers who specialized in seducing single women with properties to later strip them of their assets. My daughter wasn't his first victim. She was just the most recent in a long list of women who had lost everything for trusting him. James showed me the files from 3 previous cases. Michael had used exactly the same strategy: romancing vulnerable women, moving into their houses, isolating them from their family members, and finally keeping the properties. In 2 cases, he had managed to get the women to transfer the deeds to his name. In the 3rd, he had sold the house without authorization and had disappeared with the money. But Michael had made a fatal mistake with me. He had underestimated an old builder who knew his rights very well. My house was still in my name, I had all the documents proving my ownership, and I also had something he never expected: witnesses to everything that had happened. My neighbors had seen how they kicked me out, had heard the arguments, had witnessed the abuse. James's plan was perfect. First, we would file an eviction lawsuit against Michael for illegal occupation of private property. Second, we would expose his criminal history and multiple false identities to the authorities. Third, and most importantly, we would confront Sarah with the truth about the man she was living with. But I wanted something more than legal justice. I wanted Sarah to understand, with her own eyes, what kind of man she had chosen over her own father. I wanted Michael to know he had played with fire by underestimating Robert Thompson, and I wanted both of them to understand that actions have consequences, especially when you hurt people who love you. The first phase of the plan began on a Tuesday morning. James and a court officer showed up at my house with the eviction order against Michael. When they knocked on the door, Michael opened with that confident smile as always, but his expression changed completely when he saw the official documents. "Mr. Davis, you have 24 hours to vacate this property. You are illegally occupying a property that doesn't belong to you." Michael tried to argue that he lived there by invitation from Sarah, but the officer was very clear. Sarah Thompson is not the owner of this property. The only owner is Mr. Robert Thompson, who never gave you authorization to reside here. If you don't vacate the property within the stipulated time, you will be evicted by public force. That afternoon, Sarah called me hysterically. "Dad, what's happening? Why are there police at the house? Why is Michael saying you're going to sue him?" Her voice trembled between confusion and anger. I explained very calmly that I had decided to recover my property and that Michael had to find another place to live. "But Dad, we live here. This is our house now. You already have your place. You can't do this to us." The coldness of her words confirmed how much my daughter had changed. I told her we would be talking soon, when she knew the whole truth about Michael. I told her I loved her, but it was time for her to understand who the man she had chosen really was. Michael didn't leave in 24 hours. In fact, he tried to resist, arguing that he had rights as Sarah's common law partner. But James had prepared the second phase perfectly. Thursday morning, when Michael was heading to work, he was intercepted by district attorney agents. They had an arrest warrant for the fraud cases he had left pending in other states. It turned out Michael wasn't just a property scammer. He also had multiple arrest warrants for fraud, document forgery, and domestic violence. He had been a fugitive from justice for 3 years, moving from city to city, from victim to victim. But his lucky streak had ended the day he decided to mess with the wrong family. Sarah received the news by phone while she was at her office. Michael had been arrested and would probably spend several years in prison. Her entire perfect life, all her future plans, crumbled in a single phone call. That afternoon she came to my rented room, with eyes swollen from crying so much. "Dad, I don't understand anything. Michael is in jail. They say he's a criminal, that he's scammed other people. He says it's all lies, that you had him arrested out of revenge." Her voice was that of a lost, confused, broken little girl. For the first time in months, I saw my real daughter again underneath all the manipulation she had suffered. "Sarah, honey, sit down. It's time you knew the whole truth." I showed her all the documents James had compiled, the criminal records, testimonies from his previous victims, photos of the properties he had stolen, police reports from his ex-wives. For 2 hours, I explained step by step how Michael had planned to use her to keep my house. At first, she didn't want to believe anything. She defended Michael, insisted that everything was a conspiracy, that I had invented that evidence out of jealousy or revenge. But the evidence was overwhelming. Names, dates, places, everything matched perfectly. Michael had repeated exactly the same pattern of behavior he had used with his previous victims. The most painful thing for Sarah was understanding that he had never been in love with her. Michael had chosen her specifically because she had access to valuable property and because she lived with an elderly father who would be easy to manipulate and displace. She hadn't been his great love, she had been his next victim. Everything had been calculated, planned, executed with the coldness of a professional predator. That night, Sarah cried like she hadn't cried since she was a little girl. She apologized over and over for having kicked me out of my own house, for believing Michael's lies, for treating me as if I were a burden instead of the father who had sacrificed everything for her. But above all, she cried for having lost years of our relationship for a man who had never loved her. "Dad, forgive me. I was a fool, blind. Michael filled my head with ideas, made me believe you were the problem. He convinced me that I deserved a life without responsibilities, without taking care of anyone but myself. I didn't realize I was distancing myself from the only person who really loves me." Her words hurt and healed me at the same time. I told her that forgiveness had already been given from the moment she had come looking for me. I explained that parents don't hold grudges against their children, especially when we understand they have been victims of manipulation. But I also told her that things couldn't go back to the way they were before. We had both learned very painful lessons, and we had to build a new relationship based on mutual respect. The following months were of slow but steady reconstruction. Sarah helped me move back to my house, but this time we established clear rules about coexistence, responsibilities, and boundaries. She began contributing to household expenses, not because I demanded it, but because she had understood that was her responsibility as an adult. Michael was sentenced to 8 years in prison for multiple charges of fraud and scam. During the trial, we met 3 of his previous victims, brave women who testified about how he had stripped them of their properties and savings. One of them, Mrs. Helen Martinez, told me something I'll never forget. "Thank you for not allowing him to get away with it one more time. You saved your daughter and helped bring justice for all of us." Today, 2 years after those terrible months, Sarah and I have rebuilt a more mature, more honest, stronger relationship than we had before. She now understands the value of sacrifice, the meaning of family, and the importance of not taking for granted the people who love us. And I have learned that sometimes we have to fight for our rights, even when the fight is against the people we love most. Do you know what's most ironic about this whole story? Michael thought he could take advantage of a defenseless old man, someone who didn't have resources or knowledge to defend himself. He didn't realize he had chosen as a victim someone who had spent 74 years learning that in life, as in construction, the strongest foundations are the ones that take the longest to build. Sarah now works as a volunteer, helping elderly people who have been victims of family abuse or scams. She has found her purpose helping others avoid the mistakes she made. And I, at 76 years old, have returned to my workshop in the backyard, where I repair not only broken objects, but also the trust of neighbors who come to tell me their problems. Every Sunday, Sarah and I have breakfast together in the garden, where I grow my tomatoes and peppers. We talk about everything: her professional plans, my workshop projects, the lessons we've both learned. And sometimes, when the topic comes up naturally, we talk about Michael and how his manipulation almost destroyed our family. But there's something more important I want to share with you. During those terrible months of loneliness and humiliation, there were moments when I thought about giving up, accepting that my life no longer had value, that maybe Sarah was right, and I was just a burden. It was the letters and messages from people who had heard my story that gave me strength to keep fighting. That's why today I want to ask you something very special. If my story has touched your heart, if you know any elderly person going through a similar situation, or if you simply believe these experiences can help others, you would make me very happy by sharing this video. It's not about likes or subscriptions, although I appreciate those too. It's about creating a support network for elderly people who deserve respect and dignity. Share with me in the comments. From which city are you listening to me? Have you lived through a similar situation either as a child or as a parent? Do you know someone who has been a victim of family manipulation? Your story can give strength to someone else going through the same thing. Remember, you're not alone, that your experience can be the light someone else needs to find their way. I also want to tell you something very important. If you're a young person reading this, please don't make the mistake of taking your parents for granted. They won't be here forever. The time you have with them is limited and very valuable. Don't let anyone, no matter how in love you are, separate you from the people who raised you with love and sacrifice. And if you're an elderly person who feels lonely, abandoned, or underestimated by your family, I want you to know that your life has value, that your experience matters, that you deserve respect and dignity. Don't accept abuse, don't resign yourself to loneliness. Don't let them convince you that you're no longer useful. Seek help, fight for your rights, build support networks with others who understand your situation. My name is Robert Thompson, I'm 76 years old, and I've learned that it's never too late to defend yourself, to rebuild your life, to show that elderly people also have a voice, also have rights, also deserve love and respect. My house is still my house, my daughter has returned to being my daughter, and my story continues to be written every day. Michael thought he had won the game, but he didn't count on playing against someone who had spent 74 years learning the rules of life. In the end, patience, wisdom, and truth always triumph over lies and manipulation. Always.